Sarah Ferguson is finally ready to tell the truth. All of it. According to people close to the situation, she's no longer interested in protecting anyone else's image. The woman who once survived royal exile by staying silent is now reportedly preparing to speak. Not about the monarchy as a whole, but about one specific relationship that has been quietly misunderstood for years. Her connection to Meghan Markle. What makes this moment unsettling isn't just that Ferguson may talk. It's what she may reveal and how long she has allegedly known far more than she ever let on. This isn't a story about friendship. It isn't about loyalty, and it certainly isn't about coincidence. It's about proximity, power, and what happens when someone who knows the truth decides they have nothing left to lose. And that's where this story begins. The first warning sign didn't come from the palace. It didn't arrive through a press release, a royal aid, or a carefully crafted denial. It surfaced quietly, through whispers that Sarah Ferguson was allegedly in talks about a tell-all book. Not a nostalgic memoir, not reflections on motherhood or royal life, but something sharper, something unresolved. At first, that may not sound unusual. After all, Ferguson has written books before. But this time, sources say the conversations feel different. The tone is different, and the names involved are different, because this time, Meghan Markle is reportedly part of the story. What makes this moment alarming isn't gossip or speculation. It's the timing. Ferguson has stayed publicly restrained for decades. Even while facing humiliation, scandal, and exclusion, she survived by staying quiet. Silence became her currency. So the question becomes simple. Why now? According to those familiar with the situation, her silence was never about loyalty. It was about leverage. As long as staying quiet protected her position, her access, or her survival, she stayed quiet. But that balance has shifted. And when silence stops serving a purpose, it becomes disposable. What's emerging now isn't a sudden burst of honesty. It's the sound of long-held restraint finally cracking. And this matters because Sarah Ferguson isn't an outsider guessing at events. She was inside the room. To understand why this moment is dangerous, you have to understand Sarah Ferguson clearly. She was never naive. She was never powerless. And she was never truly gone. For years, Ferguson played a careful game. She stayed close enough to matter, quiet enough to be tolerated, and unpredictable enough to raise concern. She didn't survive royal disgrace by accident. She survived by knowing exactly when to speak and when to wait. Sources say her silence worked like a shield. As long as she stayed quiet, she remained useful. And as long as she was useful, she was protected. But usefulness doesn't last forever. Behind the scenes, Ferguson's position reportedly weakened. Titles lost their weight. Influence slowly faded. Doors that were once open began to close. And when that happened, the same system that once made room for her started moving forward without her. That's when strategy begins to feel like desperation. This is the point where Ferguson is said to have reassessed her value. If silence no longer guaranteed protection, then information might. And when information becomes currency, telling the right story to the right audience becomes a form of survival. This isn't about revenge. It isn't about anger. It's about leverage. And that's what makes the next part of this story so unsettling. For years, Sarah Ferguson publicly stuck to a simple explanation. She said she didn't know Meghan Markle. She said they first met on Meghan's wedding day. She insisted there was no prior relationship. It was neat, it was easy, and it shut down further questions. But according to new claims, that version of events may not fully stand. Sources now allege that Ferguson's connection to Meghan didn't begin at the wedding at all, and that the relationship goes back much further than she ever admitted. Not casual familiarity, not a brief introduction, but real awareness. If that's true, then the official timeline starts to fall apart. It would mean Meghan didn't enter royal life as a stranger. It would mean key relationships already existed, and certain introductions were anything but accidental. This isn't about catching someone in a lie for sport. It's about understanding why the story was simplified in the first place, why certain details were removed, and why those details are suddenly threatening enough to resurface now. Once a timeline shifts, everything built on top of it becomes unstable. And with that foundation cracked, the story moves backward to a time before Prince Harry, before headlines, and before the public ever noticed what was already unfolding quietly behind the scenes. To understand how this unfolded, the story has to move back before Prince Harry, before palace headlines, and before the world was sold a modern fairy tale. According to sources familiar with those social circles, Meghan Markle wasn't an outsider who wandered into royalty by chance. Long before Harry entered the picture, she was already moving within elite royal-adjacent spaces. These were environments where proximity mattered more than titles, and introductions carried more weight than resumes. At the centre of this world were carefully curated relationships, not random friendships, but connections that quietly opened doors. One of the most important of those relationships, sources claim, was with Princess Eugenie. That matters because Eugenie wasn't just a distant royal cousin. She was a bridge, someone comfortable in both private elite circles and royal life. This alleged friendship reframes everything. It suggests Meghan's path toward royalty didn't begin with a blind date or a sudden romance, but with access that was already in place and quietly maintained. Nothing about this world was loud. There were no announcements, no public paper trails, just invitations, introductions, and repeated proximity. And once someone enters that environment, they don't move forward by accident. They're guided. Every long story has a moment when separate paths collide. In this case, sources point to a private wedding in Jamaica as that moment. It wasn't a grand ceremony. It wasn't crowded or chaotic. What made it important was how small it was. The guest list was limited, the location was contained, and once inside, there was no avoiding anyone else present. According to accounts linked to the event, attendees included Prince Andrew, Sarah Ferguson, Princess Eugenie, and Meghan Markle. This wasn't a place where people drifted in and out unnoticed. It was intimate. Everyone present knew exactly who else was in the room. And in an environment like that, relationships don't remain hypothetical. Logistics tell their own story. Sources allege Meghan arrived by private travel, while Harry, still not officially connected to her, flew commercially. That detail alone signals something important. Hierarchy and access were already in place before the public narrative ever began. In that setting, the line between coincidence and coordination blurs. Conversations happen. Familiarity forms. Impressions are made that don't vanish just because the public hasn't been told yet. By the time the wedding ended, the paths linking these figures were no longer theoretical. They were real and they were shared. None of this happens in isolation. Elite worlds operate through networks, systems built on trust, discretion, and mutual benefit. One such network, according to sources, played a key role in managing introductions, travel, and access. Soho House wasn't about parties or celebrity status. It was about control, about knowing who belonged where, who could be trusted, and who should be introduced to whom. At the centre of that system were people who avoided attention but quietly shaped outcomes. Marcus Anderson is often named as one of those figures, someone who understood elite access and how to move people through social spaces without drawing notice. Ron Burkle, meanwhile, represented alignment, someone whose loyalties were understood and whose backing carried real weight. What matters here is the contrast. While Meghan reportedly benefited from this infrastructure, Sarah Ferguson did not. Sources say Ferguson found herself increasingly isolated from the very networks that once tolerated her presence. Doors that opened for others no longer opened for her. And that imbalance is critical because when access is controlled by a network, losing that access doesn't just hurt socially, It threatens survival. It turns insiders into liabilities and forces those who once stayed silent to rethink the value of what they know. By the time this network fully solidified around Meghan, Ferguson was already on the outside, watching, remembering, and waiting. Every carefully managed story has a moment where one decision changes everything. According to people close to the situation, that moment came when Meghan Markle allegedly made a quiet but deliberate choice. She completely distanced herself from Sarah Ferguson. No calls, no favours, no acknowledgement. Whatever that relationship once was, it disappeared quietly. From Meghan's point of view, the decision likely felt practical. Ferguson's status had faded. Her titles no longer carried weight. Her usefulness seemed to be over. And in elite circles, relationships that stop serving a purpose are often dropped without explanation. But this wasn't a casual link. Ferguson wasn't someone hearing rumours from a distance. She lived close to the truth. She remembered timelines, introductions, private moments, and people who never showed up in public photos. Most importantly, she always knew when silence protected her and when it didn't. By cutting Ferguson off, Meghan didn't just end a relationship. She removed the last reason Ferguson had to stay loyal, and from that moment, the balance shifted. From the outside, silence can look like calm, but those familiar with palace dynamics say this isn't panic, it's calculation. Prince William is described as firm and unmoved. His view is simple. Nothing coming out now threatens his future. He has no reason to bargain with the past. King Charles, however, is seen differently. Sources suggest his focus is stability, not emotion, not loyalty, preservation of the institution. And when a story threatens that balance, it isn't ignored, it's managed. That's where Ferguson's leverage returns. Not because she's trusted or welcomed, but because she's risky enough to require attention. In moments like this, silence isn't demanded, it's negotiated. The real question isn't whether she'll speak, but how much, through whom, and at what cost. Once silence loses its value, control begins to slip. Sarah Ferguson now stands at a rare crossroads where memory, history, resentment, and survival meet. She has already survived disgrace and exclusion. And now, according to sources, she may be ready to remind everyone why silence was once the safer choice. For Meghan Markle, the danger isn't one revelation. It's the slow unravelling of a story built on selective memory. Stories don't collapse overnight. They crack piece by piece until the version everyone believed no longer holds. This story isn't over. It has simply reached the point where silence becomes too expensive to keep.